We've made some huge progress in the last few weeks since my last video. So we're getting really close to being able to have at least a demo for a turnkey solution. We're getting really close to being able to provide something like an executable that will allow us to automatically build all our images and deploy it. So to break that down, what's been going on, what I've learned since the last video is actually SideFX did make a change to their licensing, and it is possible now to use Indie and use AWS UBL licenses, usage-based licenses. So if you've got Indie, you can still actually submit to AWS and pay per minute for the engine and the Mantra licenses there. And I think you can produce IFDs too. So that's a big deal. That I mean, obviously those, when you're paying for those usage-based licenses, they're expensive, so it makes sense that you should be able to do it, and it's great that they've done that. The other big things that we've been figuring out are, thanks to a lot of help from AWS support, we've figured out how to get code build to monitor a webhook for my GitHub repository. So you don't need to worry about any of this, but when we push to a GitHub repo, we can now automatically build all of our images as soon as we just push to the GitHub repository. So that's huge because it eliminates another piece of complexity where we used to have to use Cloud9. We used to have another instance that we would launch everything from. And that was a bit of a annoying chicken and egg scenario that had to be eliminated. They don't really exist. I don't believe in chicken and egg scenarios, but it usually just means you have to redefine how you want to map out what comes first. So that's really cool that we can use code to automatically build all of our images, and then we have immutable infrastructure that we can deploy. So those images, they don't have to change. So then that's the next major step. And then today, this is like just an hour ago, I managed to get Terraform to stand up another stage, which is called code deploy in AWS. And so the code deploy stage, I'm not too clear on how that's going to work, but the idea there is that you have some instance or some runner that when it gets triggered, it will go and deploy all of our images using Terraform and all of the infrastructure that we've worked on up until this point. So it's been really great to have just support from you guys funding the project, and also the support of the various companies that make these open source products. And that's why when I say we, I know that I'm writing all the code, but the reality is I get stuck, and I depend heavily on the support of these companies or on the forums, and for people to be able to take me through all of that. So when I use all of this other source code and I use all of these other code examples to be able to stand all this up, I do really think that we're standing on the shoulders of giants, and I inherit all of this stuff because of the great work that everyone else is doing. So code deploy is going to be really interesting, because what it will do is it will allow a web interface to trigger a deployment, and then that will stand up all of our instances, like our VPN and our deadline instances. So once we get to that point, I still want to figure out how I can make sure that that instance doesn't have to be running all the time, because that would be a bit annoying, but I'll figure that out. And then what else? Then I guess the next thing will be just continuing to wrap everything up. I mean, we won't be really far away from having a single executable that you'll be able to just run in an AWS cloud shell, which is really easy. All the regions, I think, have it now. It's on the top right corner. You get your own little shell. You just do a git clone, and ideally you'll execute the Firehawk repository, and it will stand everything up. Obviously there's a bit of work to do to make sure that that's all smooth and that it's easy, but the hardest parts I think are out of the way there, and that feels really good. So the next step is going to be figuring out how to make the Raspberry Pi easy for people to install. So the VPN part is still it's a lot better, but we have to use dedicated hardware to make that more secure than it was before. So we have dedicated hardware. We use a Raspberry Pi. They don't cost much. They even have power over Ethernet, so I don't even have to have a power cable into that thing. And that runs my VPN, which automatically syncs all the certificates whenever they change, using AWS message services. So I do want to try and make that simpler, a little bit easier to use. And the other thing is that if you don't really have more than one system, then maybe that whole setup is overkill, because that setup's really designed for you to be able to have your own render farm working in tandem with cloud. And if you've only got like one laptop, that doesn't make much sense. So we have to figure out how we can potentially simplify that for people that just have one laptop and they don't care about all of the other, stuff that was originally designed for, which is being able to tether your local render nodes to the cloud. So there'll be a fair bit of work there, but I do feel really good. I do feel like, the ability to launch this project and put it in people's hands is in sight. So thanks for everyone for sticking with me this far, and I'll catch you again soon.